All right, we're back on board. I actually had a question. Dee, do we have to contact the ethics board to see what they think about the idea of having them review this instead of the assembly and the mayor?
Well, they're already going to be involved in the initial determination.
So
I don't think past them they have much of a either say or interest in it.
right. Well, I actually think that, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think the assembly or the mayor needs to be involved in these things unless the person that's being removed wants to appeal. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah. I think this is an awful lot for removing one board member.
Yeah, I don't think this will actually get used very often. I mean, you said that.
Yeah,
it's very rare. In most cases, as Eric alluded to, I think it was Eric, if this is threatened, people will probably resign. The one question I wanted to ask you about Dee. Oh wait, Dee, did you draft this or did Dean?
Dean.
I did.
Okay, you did. So you have in there crimes of moral turpitude, and well, that's moral turpitude. Crimes of moral turpitude is actually a legal term of art, right? And I think Mr. Trainee is it's also very political. So I remember when I was doing work on drug laws, simple drug possession of even simple marijuana possession was a crime of moral turpitude under federal law. And so I guess my questions are, where are we getting the definition of moral turpitude, and are we worried that has been broadened too much by politics?
Right. We use moral turpitude in our personnel rules, but I'm not sure that it's defined. But I agree with you. I think it does broaden it. In the current charter provision that deals with removal by elected officials, it does not have crimes of moral turpitude. It does have felonies, which I thought was interesting as well. But it does have felonies. It does not have crimes of moral turpitude. And so maybe that's enough. I think this whole provision will be just helpful that, hey, there is a way to get people off when they really misbehave. I know of 2 instances in 10 years. We had one of these.
What I could think of, Mr. Chairman, I follow up is, misdemeanor, actually Eric taught me this, is our misdemeanor domestic violence, right? First time misdemeanor domestic violence.
Second, but anyway.
And so we could consider that. If we took out crimes of moral turpitude, is there anything else in here that would allow us to remove someone who committed misdemeanor domestic violence?
Not unless it affected their performance.
Yeah, Dee.
I guess, why would we?
This is Christopher. Could I step in and say the discussion that we had at the ethics board was that factors that materially adversely affect the performance of the board of commission, member, that sentence needs to be fixed.
Yeah, it should be or, yeah.
Yeah, anyhow, the idea there was that if it is in fact something that is related, say they were on the Awake or the Health and Social Services Commission and they were dealing with issues related to that, then it might actually be an issue that is going to affect the board. And so we didn't want to make something that's absolutely obtuse an automatic disqualifier. And in fact, this is a may be removed, not a shall be removed kind of idea. Like that, it still should leave whoever the final arbiter is with the authority to make a discretionary decision.
I'm not sure how much that list really does. If it says may include, then it may not include, but is not limited to. So there's other things it could include.
Oh yeah, I think that word "are not limited to" probably needs to come out. I mean, if you actually want to create sort of otherwise it's purely discretion, right?
Right.
Why isn't it? I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mr.
Yeah, apologize. Feels like a free-flowing work session, but I apologize for that. Why wouldn't we just say factors that materially and adversely affect the performance of the board or commission member and the performance of their as an
And just use that as the only standard. Yeah.
Well, if I may, I had a similar thought on that, and that we could add, like the liquor licenses, that action shall not be arbitrary, capricious, and unreasonable. That that our decision making should be based on actual items that relate to their function on that board, not just on any matter before the world.
Mr. Gunbar?
So actually, It's funny. I disagree with that as well. I talked about how moral turpitude was too broad a term because of unfortunate developments at the federal level in terms of drug law. On the other hand, going back to the domestic violence example, if someone commits or a sex assault, let's say, and it gets pled down to a misdemeanor, because I think almost all sex assaults are felonies. But let's say that happens, they plead to a misdemeanor that was a sex assault or domestic violence. Even if it has nothing to do with that border commission, I could see why we would want to remove that person. For the purpose, because they are in a position of public trust, because it reflects upon the assembly and the mayor to keep them there. So I could see why we would want that. So I guess if I was trying, what we're doing right now is kind of digging into this. I think at least I am in agreement with the underlying thrust of this proposal. I think it's a good one. And now we're just talking about kind of like little specifics. And so I guess for me, what I would do is like take out but are not limited to, find a way to massage moral turpitude, and then there was one other suggestion that was made about that too. I mean, there's some other. I'm talking about specifically the criteria. There was another criterion that was suggested a moment ago. Now I'm forgetting, but yeah. This hasn't been introduced yet, right? This is a draft.
Yeah, it hasn't been introduced.
And the board went round and around, so any help you can propose. I personally said massaging crimes and moral turpitude. Let's just take it out.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Well, but then how do you deal with the what I talked about, like a misdemeanor domestic violence case?
I don't know if we really want to reach that far.
I do.
You do.
Dean, I recognize that police responsible to criminal or taxing is the context of the police law that talks about that's just one group we want to say conviction for conviction rather than just say these are actions that
Conviction of a crime?
we should say conviction action rather than just an accusation.
Mr. Croft?
Well, yeah, I'm just in the queue, but I'm leaning towards deleting it all and just saying a member of a board or commission may be removed from service for breach of the public trust that materially and adversely affect the performance of the board or commission member.
Yeah. Although I
don't disagree.
That's the way to do it. Although you could make if someone really wanted to hang on to their position, I mean, they could make a strong argument that look, yeah, I did commit domestic violence, whatever, 2 years ago, but it has nothing to do with my current, participation in this board.
So we want a different process than appointment. But recognize we put these people in. The mayor selected them, and we said okay.
Yeah.
And I think we should have the authority, as you're doing in this, to take it away. Now, you didn't have a right really to get here. You have a limited right to sort of plead your case, and you've got a lot of protections in there, but we don't want you to be on this board anymore. Like, does it fit into these boxes? I don't know. We have decided, both of us, and it's a really high standard. You said it's really interesting. It's I don't even know if I'd describe it as veto. It's like consensus or whatever. And so it has to be. It ain't political in the sense of the mayor doesn't want them on this board, and a majority of the assembly doesn't want them on this board. They just shouldn't be on the board. Now, with the protection being this slim, it has to have some material. We have to articulate a way it affects if it's totally unrelated, I think that's your arbitrary. But usually there will be, or we wouldn't go to all this trouble, some reason that it affected your board. And if we can do that, and we don't want you there, and 6 plus 1, I think we should have the power.
Mr. Trainee?
Because somebody gets picked up and convicted of DUI, we really want them on the public safety commission.
Well, no.
That's
I'd want
germane.
them off of there.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, but
germane.
is it germane to the? I'll give you another example. Sexual harassment is not a crime; it's a civil offense. So it doesn't even. It's not a felony. It's not a crime of moral turpitude. It's just an administrative problem. So someone sexually harassed, let's say somebody sexually harasses someone at their private business, and it's totally unrelated to the board that they're on. I still think we want to have the authority to be able to remove that person, right? So they're on the board of adjustment. It doesn't impact it at all. But we're still like, no, you, known sexual harasser, we want to remove you, right? And so I guess I've been talking to now, I think, Eric's standard, although that doesn't quite work, right? Because it's not directly connected.
It'd be interesting, you'd have to say materially affected performance. Now,
Well, but can you just say, if I might, that it affects the performance of the individual or the reputation of the board?
So that's what the military does. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, man.
Go ahead.
So the military is, the Article 134. It's
you ever confess?
I was in military.
Oh.
it's exactly this idea. I'm trying to remember the exact language. So it's
Something that tends to
good order and discipline,
of the military
or the reputation of the armed
reputation
forces.
of the military.
Right. And so it could, you could basically say the performance of the member or the reputation of the board or commission. Right. And then that gives you much broader capacity to deal with.
And then you should add. And then I think I would also add, shall not be arbitrary and capricious.
Agreed.
And then I think that gives you, and then I think that three together gives you a pretty good legal standard. I mean, we're creating sausage here right now, D. So I don't know if we want to take another stab at this after the work session, or I'm sorry, the committee is done. But
Well, and I just happened to think of something. What if we have the initial review done, if there's a complaint about a board member, done by the ethics board, and then if the person decides they want to appeal, the appeal comes before the assembly. What do you think about that idea?
I think what he's saying though is that the final arbitration is done by the Board of Ethics, and only if there's an appeal does it come to the assembly. I don't
That's
like
what I
that.
was thinking.
Look, we've got a good board of ethics now, but I don't know that we always have, and I'm not sure I want to vest this kind of authority in it.
And I don't want to give up our authority.
When the Board of Ethics, its recommendation, the person can resign without time.
The hearing.
But what's the sugar time for the board, if they want to remove somebody, the Board of Ethics recommendation, or the incident becomes public matter. I want to know what's happening.
So if someone was being reviewed by the ethics board, would they go into executive session, D?
Yes.
At the ethics board?
Yes.
Yeah, we would.
Okay. So that covers that.
They resign before the it's just
Right.
And then there's another opportunity then, in the way I envision this is that first the ethics board makes their determination. They send us communication that we have found reason to believe that this action would be warranted. Then we also have an executive session in which we are able to hear from all the parties we want to hear. And then the executive session concludes, and so that's another opportunity for the individual to bail, resign. Then we have the hearing.
I hate expanding the secrecy part. Yeah, we don't let people
Let
testify.
people testify in executive session.
See, that's really
Executive
weird.
session, you do not make a motion to hold executive session. Just information.
Right. Okay.
Take no action there. Nor have we ever.
Well, I understand. That's what I'm saying, actually. What I'm saying is that we then meet to review the findings of the ethics board in executive session. They don't have to, because that's all recorded. We can actually use the testimony that was heard and found in the ethics board. That's taped. We can have that and whatever communication they make. So we have a discussion. Then we have a public hearing, because you don't want to air those things. We don't want to take the resolution of the ethics committee to the public if in fact we're going to disagree with them.
There are all kinds of opportunities for this person to drop off. And then it seems like when you finally get to that level, they have recommended that they be dismissed. That tight portion be an executive session, but really all you're doing is hearing the ethics board say why it did it, and from the person, if they want, saying why they shouldn't. And then we get to step out into the world and make a call.
Agreed.
And all the stuff, like, it was a confidential process to protect up to then, but if you want to fight it still, with all those safeguards, then now it's public. The public
Agreed.
has a right to hear
I just
that.
don't want anybody else, any witness coming into executive session.
Yep.
Say they want to be the assembly and the individual.
And the ethics person.
They want to be there. But it's, we get the information, we make the decision based on that.
I fully agree with that process.
Well, I think that, these are volunteers for boards and commissions, and I think that if someone turns them into the ethics commission for an ethics violation, I think most of them will resign immediately. Just to get out of the hassle, because it's a voluntary thing that they're doing anyway. It's not like they're getting paid for this. This isn't their day job. So I don't know how often we'd end up with
Mr. Chair.
having to, as the assembly, having to review what the ethics board decided.
Ideally, very rarely, very, very rarely, hopefully never, but we want to reserve that power. And I think that, I don't know if there's, indeed, this might be something for you to contemplate, a difference between this process and an ethics complaint per se. And I don't know if that's the case, if we're just expanding the ethics complaint function, right? I don't know. That's an interesting question.
Because the ethics code rewrite, the ethics board, all they do is make, from the complaint process, make recommendations to, I think we say to the assembly and the mayor. We don't lay out how, but that it's always a recommendation. And we did that because the few times we actually wanted to take action, one or the other were afraid to do that because of different repercussions. So it's just easy. Okay, we make the recommendation, you figure out and implement it if you want to.
I see.
So it just works that way anyway.
So, if I might, then we're at the end of this hour. I think then, taking all this feedback, I'm going to work with Dee to come up with another version, and we'll take input and get it massaged.
Will we set this up for a work session sometime, or what do you think?
I have one question about the language here.
Okay, Dean.
Anything says was initiated by a member of president by the administration. And what does that mean? Does that mean maybe a person, a mayor who's destiny instead?
I'm not sure.
What's the member of the
Number 2?
Yes, no, section 2, number 2, right?
Is that what you're talking about?
Right. Request for review by the ethics board shall be initiated by a member designated by the administration or by the
Probably
assembly.
employee or something. I wanted to put in the concept there, this isn't an open thing, like another board member can't make a complaint, has to come either from the administration or the assembly.
Yeah, not a board member.
I would rather just say a request for review by the ethics board shall be initiated by the mayor or by the assembly member.
Okay, yeah.
Have the mayor do their own dirty work
Agree.
and not worry who has the rows on them.
Yep.
The mayor or assembly member, okay?
Or by the assembly member, yeah. Yeah, it's just not an open process.
Any comments from the committee about that change? All right. Well, I think, Mr. Cont'd, if you and Dee would like to do a little bit more work on this, I think we had a really good discussion here in the last half hour about your initial idea. So, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's good, and maybe we'll aim for a work session next Friday, and aim to get something introduced for a first reading in advance.
Would you see if we have any work sessions next Friday?
I'll check, yeah.
Dee, does that work for you in terms of your timeline?
Yes, that'd be fine.
Okay, great.
Thank you all for your input.
Okay, fantastic. Well, looking at my agenda, do we have any old business anybody on the committee wants to bring up while we're still here? Any audience participation? Yes, sir.
My name is Eugene Carl Haberman. I live in the Metro City of Valley. I follow the public process. The public process done appropriately. Decision made by the governing body is more likely in the public interest. Please note this meeting started with a notice of this meeting was to be had in City Hall on the second floor. Prior to this meeting, I went to their dark room, formed with clerk staff that just was moved here. The notice on the website, even technically right this second, shows it at the other location. I asked staff there and other party that was present to please call to stop the meeting because the minimum requirements of the Open Meetings Act is time, date, and location. This meeting failed in that. This is absolutely wrong. Second of all is this, I couldn't help but notice that Barbara Jones is not around. I realize the importance of election, but obviously we're talking about significant issues here that the municipal clerk should have been present, and she's been out of this meeting for more than a half hour. But also let's take a look at this meeting and how the public is connected to be able to be here, wherever they come from. It's in an area where it's very noisy, very difficult to hear. And then when a presiding person, whoever's in charge of the meeting, there should be an opportunity to recognize the person before they speak. So that on a tape recording, which is here, and hopefully all was heard on that tape recording, but I had a very difficulty in hearing everyone speaking. And how can a tape recorder hear that if I'm real close to the tape recorder and I can't hear everyone in this room speaking? And then when whoever is speaking, they should be recognized so the tape recorder, the person who's listening to that tape later on, the public, whoever, knows exactly who's speaking. And this is basic meeting rules. This has not been changed except that municipality of Anchorage and other bodies seem to have what we call a free-for-all discussion. And that's what this is. A free-for-all discussion creates a situation that becomes long-ended meetings and not getting business done, and not protecting the public. And I remind you of a separate law. State law requires that you provide a reasonable opportunity for the public to be heard. Reasonable means no comment. This makes the 7th election that I've monitored. I've been doing this since April 3rd, 2012. And it looks like it's going to be the 7th election that I will declare illegitimate. And our last point, I'll just say this. There was a so-called town hall meeting. You may have heard about that with the mayor, Chugach, representative, and the city manager sitting in stools assembly. The instructions at the beginning of that so-called town hall meeting dealing with the billion-dollar question on the ballot was to the public there with a lot of press that stated the words. The public could not question but could not comment. Instructions to the public. This is not the way to go. Thank you very much, but I respectfully time myself to be 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right. I'll accept a motion for adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
We are adjourned.